Welcome everybody to the deep dive for the second annual Building Hope Impact Summit and Awards. We're here today with some of our winners of the awards to discuss what is next in education. So guys, welcome. How are you doing? You're welcome. Okay, so what's next, guys? You all have amazing schools that are doing phenomenal things for students all over the country, but where are we going from here? What are some of the things that are working at your school that you see are really taking hold with the students or the faculty? How's that going for you? What you doing and what's next?
Well, one thing that we are doing at Galileo School for Gifted Learning in Sanford, Florida is we have two campuses, and on both campuses we have small operating farms. And so on those farms, our middle school students get to do everything from hatch the chicken all the way to the end of life cycle, so to say. Right now we just got a donkey as well who is near the point of giving birth. So in a couple days, they'll be able to help assist in the birth of the donkey. Cool. They have administered vaccines, medicine. I go out there and they're picking mites off chickens. So just establishing that value of taking care of something from beginning of life to end of life, seeing the process through, and really turning our students into leaders in the real world, especially in our rural districts that we serve.
So I'm fascinated by this because a lot of people who aren't in rural areas, like, what is the point of taking care of a chicken? Like, what does that really give them that's going to help them succeed?
Mm-hmm. It gives them responsibility. Yeah, it gives them something to take care of, something to care for, and it also gives great opportunities for them to go into our classrooms for our younger students. We're a K-8 building, so they can then in turn educate those younger students on all the responsibilities of taking care of something that's alive.
Oh, that's amazing.
Samantha, if I could piggyback on that for a minute, at Codman Academy Charter Public School in Boston, we've also had a number of those kinds of conversations about what do we do to grow things, especially things that we're used to getting in supermarkets, for example, right? And I remember during the pandemic, it was a real conversation about scarcity of goods and scarcity of resources. And all of a sudden, all those folks living in cities were like, what are we going to do if there's no food? The price of eggs right now is skyrocketing across the country. To have chickens available, to be able to lay eggs and take those home, that's amazing. For our children at our school, we have connections to Holly Hill Farms, which is one of our partners. We have these gardens out back, so students are learning how to grow food. And I think it's just an important thing as a kid. I didn't get that growing up in New York City. And I think it's a great thing, not just for rural environments, but for kids in the city as well. So in addition to responsibilities, just what do we need to do the means of production around food development and food production?
I met this farmer who was on a farm inside the school that we had, and his name was Dale. And Dale told me the story that when he went to college, because he grew up on a farm, right? He went to college, he said, and they brought out the bread. He goes, and it was the most perfectly sliced bread I had ever seen in my life. And he's like, who is back there cutting? And they're like, nobody cutting, this is just how it comes. He had never seen properly sliced bread. And so then he said when he brought his fraternity brothers back home, and he said, oh, we're gonna have eggs and it's gonna be the most amazing thing. Come on, we're gonna go to the chicken house and get the eggs. And they're like, what? We're not, what? The chicken, the things are brown and they're warm and ew, right? But and what he was saying was, we've lost that connection to where our food comes from because so many of us are not involved in that day to day. But I'm really interested because our conversation started with like, what's the future? But the future seems to be in the past. Like, is it? Are we bringing back some of those things that were these one-room schoolhouses on farms and learning that, or what do you think?
I don't know about that, but what I'm hearing is, and maybe this is experienced legal prep in Chicago. We don't really have a space to have a full functioning farm, but I think experiential learning is really an important feature in education, and that's when I hear about having like the experience like Galileo's having. I hear like opportunity to kind of see things for yourself in action. That we do the same thing. So we have our kids go do judicial externships over the summer. They're working with law firms, corporate legal departments during the school year, and sort of seeing the law close up, I think, is a different experience than learning it from a book. You get to kind of see it in action. So.
I love what you said there. So one of the things I think is next in education is at Logos Public Charter School, what we do is we give people choice around how they do every part of their education. So the pandemic made people realize that if you sit at a dinner table, you don't all get the same table, you don't all get the same drink. And people want choices around you know, how they do their reading, how they do their math, how they do their schooling, choices around what school they choose. And I think that the pandemic really brought forth that choice. And I think you're going to see many more schools that are experiential in some way, or giving people choices that they're like, you know what, that one speaks to me. That school, that program, that choice, that curriculum, whatever it is, people don't want one size fits all anymore.
I would have to agree. At Life Learning Academy, which is an urban school, and we do have chickens and a farm to table culinary program, but this element of choice and of control and of schools having the freedom to ask themselves the questions, do 5 days a week, 8 hours a day in a classroom, learning from books, is that what's going to work for us? And that's, I think, something that, no, we're not going to go directly back to Miss Beadle, Little House on the Prairie kind of one-room schoolhouse model, is being able to learn outside, being able to learn while doing, being able to have internships. For us, Fridays are a work day, and our students are all off campus in their various work programs, and they also need to earn money. Many of them are helping to support their families, and so that's critical for our school to work.
That's awesome. It seems like it needs to just be tied to they're tying it to their futures almost. It sounds like what they're doing in all your schools. And what about you, Dave? How's yours?
At Exploration, we believe to move away from passive regurgitating of information to purposeful learning. So how are our students engaging in the real world? The things you're all saying, and I'll go back to the food because lunch is on my mind. But how are we co-creating a curriculum with our students and giving them that choice and agency in that, and connecting the subjects so that there's a cross-discipline connection. So right now, our math teacher is collaborating with our English teacher, and our science and our social studies. You often don't hear or see like how math and English, how do those fit together? And our inquiry question was, how do we build sustainable systems? And students ended up through that kind of choosing, do I want to do an outdoor garden build, or do I want to do an indoor aquaponics, aeroponics, or hydroponic system build? And so they were able to have to go to our landlord and say, hey, we want to build these things on your property, and so here's your business proposal, and have to present that. So they're learning those skills. And then you got to do the math, and okay, here's your $500 budget for that, and I got to go to the mulch and soil in Minnesota, and what's the area, and figuring out all that. And when they start to make those connections and see, then they start adding meaning. And I think of one of our sophomores, Josiah, who grew in her garden lavender, is what she really wanted to do is start her own cosmetics business. And so she was like, I got really excited to grow my own lavender so I could infuse it in my own products and then sell that. So then she's learning her own entrepreneurial skills. But she was able to have that choice and agency through that curriculum.
That's awesome.
That reminds me of our two biggest choice programs that we have at our school, which is students every year at our middle school level are able to choose the electives that we offer, from science, French, robotics, medical detectives. Medical detectives just last week was casting their footprint in plaster and like dusting it off to practice, getting evidence. They've like typed their own blood. I mean, it's really amazing. And so if they say that they want it and there is enough interest, we'll offer it as a course. And then at the end of every day as well, we have something called Creative Productivity, which cycles every 4.5 weeks. But they tell us what they want, what they're interested in. It's not graded, it doesn't go into any system, but it's, if you're interested in building roller coasters, if you're interested in paleontology, if you're interested in, creating your own Dungeons and Dragons type game, it's just things for them to explore based solely off of student choice.
That's amazing. All your schools seem to do this, right? You seem to really be engaging with your students and figuring out what they want. You're not telling them what they need, right? And pulling from that direction instead. But also what I'm hearing is it's a reflection of our society now. Your schools are.
I think we're preparing to operate in the 21st century rather than, in centuries past, because when you're looking at it now, it's a really exciting time, right? You have the emergence of AI and ChatGPT, and I think everybody at this table, at least from understanding, I haven't quizzed you on it, but would be excited about that technology, not scared of it, not like, oh, this is totally going to upend the regurgitation of facts. It makes it obsolete. And so I think what we're doing is trying to give skills to students that they will need to be successful in this environment where a lot of the jobs that maybe existed, even like right now, are going to be gone by the time they graduate from high school.
Yeah, I would say that the traditional public schools haven't changed much in 100 years. And they don't necessarily meet the modern needs, especially after the pandemic. And I think what we're doing is we're giving ownership to students. So when you went through traditional public school and you sat there and you went from class to class and you were told where you were going and then you're going to the next place, you almost felt like school was something being done to you. Like that was done to me. And now when you're saying, okay, I'm going to allow you choice in how you do your English, how you do your, what school you choose, what elective, what extracurricular, what how you're choosing to do this education, then you can then go forward and be like, I did that.
I love what you said about that. That's the main reason why I left traditional public schools, was because I saw these cookie cutter educations that were supposed to fit everybody and it fit no one at the same time. So I feel, even since the time that I've graduated school, I felt that, okay, I entered college with this in mind and I can't deviate from this path. But with all this school choice, I feel like we're allowing them to grow and be human, and it's okay for them to switch paths in life instead of just setting out with one goal and that's the only goal you can have.
There's a really great book called The End of Average. And one of the stories in there, did you read it? I love that book. They had measured the average pilot size, right? They took all the pilots, the fighter pilots, right? And they were going to get the average. And they made this $1 billion plane with the average seat, right? It fit no one, not a single one. They were like, I can't do it, and you're like, okay. And there was the other story was that I loved, I thought it was so funny, was one of the department stores in Cleveland, they wanted to see the average size of a woman. Right? And so they've got the average size. They couldn't find this woman anywhere. And they finally found like 2, right? And so they picked one. But the strange thing that happened was average became ideal. Mm-hmm. And it's like, wait a minute. And so I feel like education has gone for average is ideal in general. And then the charter school movement is like when we said no, right? One size does not fit all, and we can do better than average because it still fits no one. Like that box we all talk about working outside of, no one fits that box. No one has ever fit that box. That box is an illusion, right? So you guys are doing this now. How do we create a sustainable system so we can do more of this?
Well, yeah, I mean, I'll jump on that because it does feel like we are still, though, we are all born, our schools are born into a situation where the average matters, where the people who are the gatekeepers of the next level for our children are still telling us you need to meet these standards on a test, a state level test, you need to have this standard for SAT, this is what it takes in your composite and educational experience to get into these schools. So we're very much, even if we are outside the boxes, our models, our system individually, we're still preparing students to go into a very boxed reality, right? And so one of the things I'm actually really grappling with now is how do we do both, right? And how do we do both effectively, especially in a time when we literally, I'm nerve-sighted about ChatGPT. That's a great possibility, and also, are they coming to get us, right? I have both of those. I've seen a lot of science fiction movies where this did not go the way it was supposed to go. And we don't know, we have no idea the way that it's evolving. These systems are changing so quickly. It's not even what's gonna happen 5 years from now. What's gonna happen at the end of this year in terms of what ChatGPT does, right? And so how do we then create for the box and also create for this reality that doesn't exist, that is here every day, that changes in the next month, right? And so grappling with that with educators, I'll just give one example of that at the school level. Our teachers are looking at ChatGPT and they're incorporating it into the classroom, right? So they're having conversations, they're saying, here's how you use it, this is what it looks like, great, let's have that conversation. I think we gotta keep ahead of that curve if we're gonna have a chance at getting our students the tools they need to actually be successful when they leave us.
Yeah, I think that's fascinating.
And to build on that, because for us, it's all about the creative and collaborative skills. Like how are we thinking and creating students, empowering them to be problem solvers in the community? Because you think about all these world issues and then you add the political climate across the country, the racial inequality that's there, gender rights, there's so much. And so the world that their students going in, how can they be change makers and leaders and problem solvers in that? And so for us at the school level, it's about the design thinking process and liberatory design, in starting in a place of empathy and really understanding to what you said of like, okay, if I'm gonna design the solution, I need to know who I'm designing for. And it's the thing all of our ninth graders come in is, I have this idea and this is what it's gonna be. we got to take a step back from that first and go ask and have those conversations to enact that change and design the solution for someone else. And that'll kind of infuse the creativity and critical thinking skills that our world needs.
Yeah. To your point about, though, the trying to do for both, right? So it's like we're trying to appease a system that has been proven not to work and is antiquated, and spending a lot of energy, time, and resources on it. And then there's this part that is working, that is preparing the students for the future, that we have to pull from the resources and put them over here, which makes clearly no sense when you look at it that way. But we do live in the world, and the world does have political realities, things like that. But how do we see, without getting into a deeper political discussion, but just more on a level of, as a group of charter leaders, even just sitting at this table, how many students are represented, how many families are represented, how do we encourage others to look past the labels, charter, public, traditional, all the other things, to actually start focusing in on what's best for the students?
In California, which is where Life Learning Academy is located, the state is investing billions of dollars in the community school model, which is where the communities that are being served are helping to define education, and it includes the parents and the families. And so it's a much more holistic and a much more whole child. And these awards are going to a few charter schools, not enough, but also many public schools, to kind of rethink that because needs vary.
How is it in all your states and all your environments? Is there a supportive environment? And you can be honest.
I was going to say, in Oregon, it's not as supportive. It's a rather newer movement. It's 1999, and the minimum that the districts can hold back from the charter schools is 20%. So 20% K-8 is taken off the top, and then we have all the public retirements, and we can't build the buildings and all those things like that. So it's a difficult state to be in. But I will say that one of the things that I believe in is we hold our head up high and we keep doing the right things for kids. And eventually, if you have that longevity of you're transparent, you're ethical leader, your kids are doing great results, it's gonna come. And you just keep believing that you have to fight the good fight for as long as possible. And if you give that longevity, and then eventually you get a building and people see a nice building over there and they're like, wow, you guys are doing great work. I think that the credibility, I never want anybody to know what my politics are on anything. I really don't. I don't want any of my students to know, because I have every spectrum of everybody, and I'm thrilled with that. And so we have to serve the kids that are in our building, and we have to do it with our heads held high.
Yeah, I really wonder about what it takes to build bridges that are actually going to allow for our children to get what they need to get done. Not just internally. I think we all value our students collaborating, being compassionate with one another, doing the work inside the building that's going to help them to work together towards a goal. But I also think about, where do we build bridges to our colleagues in the traditional public school system, to folks in private schools, to policymakers, to people who are building the practices at the Department of Education, so that we can say to them, hey, some of these things that you all have us, these hoops you have us jumping through, these don't actually help us, and here's why, right? And so if we could redirect that energy into this building for the future, that actually could help us a good deal. Some of the ways in which you conceive of assessments, it's not going to help us. Let's do experiential learning. Let's have performance-based assessments. Let's make that the norm, right? It's much more expensive. It's harder to norm, all those things. I don't care. It's better for kids. How do we have those conversations? And so some of the work we're doing in Massachusetts is using our statewide network of charter schools to do advocacy work. We have the Massachusetts Charter Public School Association that works really hard to just be with the legislators, right, on Beacon Hill, advocating specifically for policies that help charters, but really help all public schools, right, so we can move the work forward. And I think that's the kind of sort of multidimensional chess we have to play, so that we're not just being successful with our kids in our own buildings, but we're actually sort of broadening, the success amongst a wider range of public school students.
That's where our kids were yesterday, was at the Capitol in Minnesota, just doing that in the policy, doing that work. And there's a bill right now around teacher licensure and making it harder for teachers actually to get licensed in Minnesota. And so one of our teachers testified, and our students were there, and To your point, at Exploration, we're an open source campus, and we want to go back to where, charter schools were started in St. Paul in the early 90s, the first charter school. And so we want to go back to where it started as an innovative hub of that collaboration and those ideas and partnering with districts, because their students aren't a number. Their name and they're a person and they matter. And so we want to open up and partner with districts. There's one nearby that we've started to that's kind of rethinking what their high school can look like. And so that's, I think, part of opening up the conversation beyond just, oh, you're a charter, you're a private, you're a traditional school. How can we all work together? And you don't have to replicate what we're doing, but it's different fits to each community, and we can learn and work together on that.
I feel like the advocacy, so I'm on our Oregon Department of Education Advocacy Committee, I'm on another lobbying committee, but I really think too, the advocacy needs to be amongst other charters, because as soon as there is a negative story about a charter, of course it affects us all. And so what we have to do, if we've been longtime leaders in our charter school, is make sure when a new leader comes up at a next door charter school that we're talking to them about ethics, because we all know that there's no training necessarily to starting and running a school. So let's make sure we're getting into our next door neighbor charter schools and make sure that they're going to have a good basis for how to run an organization.
I think that is a great idea. So let's do it right now. So what are some of the learnings that you guys have experienced that if I'm going to start a charter school tomorrow, brand new charter school leader, because being a charter school leader is different from being a traditional school leader and different from being a private school leader. So for those charter leaders, what would be some advice that you would give them? Right? Some of the lessons learned, some of the things to watch out for. What do you think that you would be like, okay, let me have a sit. Let's have a sit. What do you think some of the things you would say?
Have a mentor, to your point. I just opened a school 2 years ago, and if it wasn't for a charter school leader in the area, I don't think we'd be where we are, because there's a lot of things behind the scenes, your point of to learn. It's a learning curve. So I would get a good mentor.
Say, remember customer service. Your school of choice, voices and choices. And I think that was my biggest lesson learned, was coming from an all Title I background to all of a sudden pretty much the exact opposite of that, and just turning on that customer service personality and voice and face really makes things go a long way.
Yeah, and I would say this, and this is unique, I think, to education. Your fellow charter school leaders are here to help you. In the law, I can't imagine going to somebody else and saying, "Hey, can I take a look at your brief? You spent a lot of time on that. Could you send that over to me?" That just doesn't happen. But in education, I was once that person, brand new to education, no formal training, starting a school. And every time I picked up the phone and called somebody, they were sharing, they were inviting me in, they were showing me stuff. And I think there's just such a good spirit of collaboration within the charter community that if you don't take advantage of that, that's really on you.
I would say for me, it's I believe in passionate dialogue is what I call it. So I like to surround myself with people who are strong personalities. I don't want a board who's going to say yes, 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 because my degree's in history. I've never run a couple $1 million budget or any of those things like that. And charter schools fail because of finances a lot of times. And so we have to make sure that we have good people around us who will say, no, are you sure? And what will happen a lot of times in my case is someone will say no, and then we'll work on it and we'll engage a little more, and then we change it a little bit, and then we change it again, and then we change it a fourth time, and the fourth time is really the answer we needed to begin with. So having that passionate dialogue with people where you're not having people that you should not ever have people that all say yes to you.
That's really good advice.
I would say, because you're in a moment of opportunity and invention, to really focus on the needs of the individual students, and remember that you're serving a group, but you're also serving students one by one. And so the concept of equity and not equality, and not sort of trying to smooth it over with the law of averages, because as we know, it doesn't work.
Can you just explain the difference between equity and equality?
Equality is everyone gets the same thing. Equity is everyone gets what it is that they need.
Yeah, I love these answers, and I think I wish you all were around when I started in my seat to tell me some of these things. I think the one that I would add is a real paying attention to the teachers and to the staff. we in our seats are only as successful as the folks who are in our classrooms leading the most important work of teaching our children the things they need to know. And I think it's hard to actually continuously engage people in passionate conversations. I say that way? Passionate dialogue around things where they're actually very passionate and where there's real disagreement. But it's helpful in the long run, as you said. And I also think it keeps to that spirit of entrepreneurial and that spirit of we're in it together when you're able to have those conversations over time. And so I would say a new leader, build processes to elicit feedback and that are thoughtful, and you can share it back to folks and say, I listened, I heard, here's some things I'm doing, and keep refining that. It has to be a constant process if you want your school to be successful long term.
I think those are great pieces of advice. So Dave, what is the one thing that you would die on a hill for your school?
Co-creation.
Co-creation. Okay, tell us about co-creation a little bit.
Co-creating alongside our students and staff, and that's the heart of what we do at Exploration. And opening, pre-operationally and before we were open, we were having design sessions with prospective students and families and ask them questions, even around informing the calendar or around the curriculum. And so kind of keeping that spirit when we opened in our first year was around our culture. And it was, what do you want to keep on the inside? What do you want to keep on the outside of our community? And engaging in conversations with the students where we co-wrote the handbook. And so to your point of processes, what is that in place? How do you have a process to co-create alongside students and staff?
That's great. Does anybody else have one they want to share?
In Good to Great, they talk about the hedgehog concept and what to protect. And I love that. And if someone hasn't read that book, read the book, because we keep going back to that concept of what are we protecting? Because you can shift and change with the wind about they now want you to do this, and now they want you to do this. But if you keep coming back to what are you passionate about, what drives your economic engine, and what can you be best at the world at, and stay with those things, then you don't move with the wind quite so much. And sometimes when you move with the wind, you get to become a new school that you never were to begin with. And it doesn't mean that that's bad if that's intentional. But I also think that we're great and have these great wait lists and because we are who we are, and we need to not forget who that is.
Alongside that, we are who we are, but I think that the thing that we hold fast to is the listening and responding to the needs of the students, because they change all the time. And as an example of that, probably about 2015, Life Learning Academy found that many of our students were not living safely or securely, and we actually lost a couple of students during that time, and it was clear that what we really needed was an on-site place for them to live. And so we raised the money and we built a free dormitory, which has been phenomenal for our community, and it's a very flexible program, and some live there for full time, and some go home on weekends. We're about to take it. Those students who moved in 2019 are going to be graduating, and we're about to listen again and make some alumni housing for them.
Wow.
Yeah.
In a place like the Bay Area, I can't think of something more important, right? Where housing costs are so high, and where those basic needs of children just aren't being met, or families aren't being met. We're actually wrestling with that same thing at Codman Academy and trying to figure out how do we build both teacher housing. The average cost of a home, it's crazy in the city of Boston, the Boston area, and then also for our kids and for our families. One thing that I know we talk about a lot is teaching for social justice. That's an important piece of who we are. And the good thing about that is that there are so many ways in which our society is unjust that it's impossible to not continue to do that work no matter what we look like, right? The bad thing about that is that there are so many ways in which our society is unjust. And so it feels like it's an important part of continuously engaging conversations with students. Sometimes the injustice for our young people is the food in the cafeteria is not good enough. Why don't you let me change the uniform, right? Like all these same, these things. And so we got to pay attention to those too. But also things like housing insecurity, or the fact that the heat island effect in our neighborhood is so much greater than in the wealthy community that's a 10-minute drive away, right? So things like that are what we can continue to advocate for, and certainly engage our students in having those conversations and and doing that work writ large.
So can you unscare them? Like what is it that curriculum based on social justice is about? Like what's at the core of it?
Yeah, I don't think there's anything scary about saying all the families who live in this country should have access to food, to clothing, to shelter. I don't think there's anything scary about that. Or that people should have jobs they can do with dignity and be respected for, right? I can talk about a million things that are in that way, right? But the reality is so many members of our society and of our country aren't afforded that for various reasons, for their identity, for where they live, for the language they speak, for who they love, right? And so for us to be able to say clearly, equity means we got to give more to those who need more. And for us to say clearly, we have to move beyond equality. We have to move into the space of, we're not just teaching you so that you can go make a lot of money when you leave us. We're teaching you so that you can be a better human and that you can support other humans at living in a better world. That's why we teach. It's really hard to argue with that, right? Although I think some people do, and those folks, like, I won't spend my time arguing with you, because if you don't believe that, then I don't think you really believe in humanity.
Very nice. Do you have one?
Yeah, I was going to say my hill to die on for our students would be that student empowerment piece, whether it is letting them choose electives and create productivity cultures, but also empowering them in academics. I think people hear a lot Galileo School for Gifted Learning, and they assume that we have a whole bunch of little Galileos and Da Vincis running around, and we really don't. So still finding something for those students who don't have that gifted label, and who some are even 1 to 2 years below grade level, and still meeting them and their needs and where they are to make sure that they're having that same fun, engaging learning experience as the kids with the label, with the gifted label.
Yeah, that's great. So the other thing I always am curious about is that, and we joked about it a little bit, this is not an easy path that you all chose to make this difference, right? Why'd you do it? Like, what's your why? What is it that makes you wake up in the morning and put your feet down and you're ready for that fight one more day? Because it isn't always a party, and some of you are kind of at the end of your tenure, I know, but what is it that really drives you to do it, right? Because you could make more money, you could be more fabulously famous, you could be all of these other things that you could have done with your time, your talents, your skills. Why this?
It's just so much more rewarding than other things that I've done personally, at least. If you talk about being an attorney or some of the other jobs I've had, law professor, I just love working with high school students. Just seeing the light bulb go on when they sort of get it for the first time, or are making that big decision on whether to go to college. It's so much fun. I think, and if I could do it without managing adults, maybe I would do that. But it's a blast working with the young people, for sure.
Oh, that's great. Anybody else want to share?
I know for me, I don't know why, but it just feels like my calling. It's not a job, it's not even a career, it's like my calling. And when I was talking to somebody recently, they said, I came to work for you because you glow. And I'm like, but I glow because I love what I do. And I don't know how to explain that, but when you have a purpose in a school that you love and things that you're doing every day, and it's hard. People, adults love them, they're hard. It's fighting the good fight so that you can continue helping the next generation, and like you said, just helping them have a better humanity. It just feels like you're doing the right thing for people. I can't explain it any more than that.
Beautiful.
I know I want to be the person that I didn't have growing up for some kid.
Ooh, yeah.
Because I wasn't the smartest, I wasn't the brightest. I always tell people I took geometry 3 times, and then finally got my A when I babysat for my teacher. And it wasn't
very resourceful.
Yeah, looking back, it wasn't that I wasn't smart. I just didn't learn that one particular way, and they weren't willing to deviate from what they weren't comfortable teaching. So I want to be a part of that movement that gets rid of the cookie cutter and tailors to the student. Because everybody can learn, everybody can be successful. When I was a music teacher and kids would say, oh, I can't sing. Yes, you can. You can learn it just like anything else. So everybody can sing, everybody can learn. Anybody can do whatever you put your mind to.
That's great. Anybody else want to share?
There's a great Pedro Rupe quote that ends, fall in love, stay in love, and the rest will decide everything.
Ooh,
And
I love that.
for me, I've fallen in love with youth and youth voice and empowerment. And to what you said around the social justice themes and the reality of the world, everything we've been talking about, the youth are the present, they're our future, and we need to give them the tools. And so I care a lot about our world, making it a better place, in creating young people who are empathetic, who are creative, who are problem solvers, and I love doing what I do.
So my why, too, is that every single child has a brilliant light inside of them, right? And so many of them, we just go to it. Before, there's a great exercise that they did with children, and they gave them a paper clip. And say, how many things can you create from this paper clip? And it's like 267. You give it to an adult, and they're like, well, you could clip paper, or you could clip bigger paper, or you could, and I'm like, what has happened? And what has happened is they were taught over and over and over again not to risk, not to be creative, not to be themselves, not to do any of these things. And it ruins their spirit, and it makes them angry, you know, and it hurts them, and hurt people, right? So I really, truly, my why is I want to change the world, and we can. You guys are doing it every day. We just need more of it, right? So anyways, on that, any last words that you'd like to share?
I'll add one more that feels like it's connected to what you're saying. I had a great mentor for a long time, amazing fellow named Ron Walker. He runs the COSPOC, which is the organization that does schooling for boys of color across the nation. And he said to me a long time ago, he said, you know, schooling, he's a former principal, former teacher. He said, schooling is for compliance and education is for liberation. That's what he says. And for me, it's that idea of how do we get more free and how do we help each other to get more free. And that's at the core for why I think folks like us need to do the work with young people and with staff and with families, because there's a lot of us who aren't free yet. You know, we gotta do more to get there.
Thank you, everybody, so much for all of the work that you do every day for our students, for our present, and for our future, because making the world a better place is making better humans to make the world a better place. And thank you all for watching, and I hope you feel as inspired as I do, and that you have a little hope for the future of education because of the folks sitting in this room right now. Thank you very much.